In today's video, we're discussing some potential trade rumors involving the New York Rangers and Washington Capitals. Plus, we also have some details on where we might see the 2021 Winter Classic. We have all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news updates today. First of all, I wanted to get into the 2021 Winter Classic. Now, as reported by Chris Johnson on Saturday Headlines on Hockey Night in Canada last night, he's discussing the possibility that we might see the Minnesota Wild host the 2021 Winter Classic, where we could see a Wild versus Winnipeg Jets game, which would certainly be an entertaining game. Winnipeg Jet fans are typically very supportive of their team. They sell out quite a bit, and obviously Winnipeg and Minnesota are very close together, so I'm sure plenty of Jets fans would make their way down to the outdoor game should that take place. Now, he did also mention that it's not a slam dunk by any means, that if Minnesota gets their way, that's what's likely going to take place, but we very well could see teams like the Chicago Blackhawks or the St. Louis Blues be involved in one capacity or another, possibly even hosting. I mean, the Blackhawks have had plenty of opportunities. I know we've heard many different fans out there voice their opinions about outdoor games. Some feel that it's overdone. Some feel that the same teams get over and over many opportunities, which they do, but to a degree, they do go with, who's going to sell the tickets, who's going to get the ratings on TV. So obviously some of the bigger market teams do get more opportunities in that regard. But we very well could see Minnesota versus Winnipeg, which would certainly be a nice change of pace, a new opportunity for both those clubs, and certainly could enhance the rivalry moving forward. Now, last night's game between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings started to get kind of ugly near the end. We saw some situations that I'm surprised we didn't hear from NHL player safety on. The one situation that did result was Robby Fabbri getting fined the maximum amount allowable, which is a little over $2,000, which really isn't much for these players making the kind of salaries they do, for spearing against Alex Kerfoot. So he was fined for that, but we did see some situations earlier with Jake Muzzin basically kind of body slamming Anthony Mantha, where he hit his head hard on the ice. I would not be surprised if he's concussed and possibly out for an extended period of time. Now, we also saw Red Wings forward Andreas Athanasiou after that take another run at the Maple Leafs, which certainly looked like could have been called for kneeing. I mean, it certainly was a very reckless play. I'm surprised that there wasn't anything that came from that as well, even if it was just a fine. For the Red Wings, the game was well out of reach. I'm not really sure why they reacted the way they did to some of these situations. I understand defending a teammate, but I think they might have reacted a little bit too aggressively in a game that was out of reach. Really didn't make a lot of sense, but at the end of the day here, we're likely going to have a fairly significant injury to Mantha, but nothing came about for Jake Muzzin or Athanasiou at all from player safety, which does surprise me a little bit. I'm surprised there wasn't potential suspensions or at least a fine for any of those other players involved here besides Fabbri. So certainly will be interesting to see how these two teams shape up in their next game, to see if there's any retaliation or anything to that effect. Of course, the Red Wings and Leafs are old rivals, but obviously nowadays the rivalry is a bit toned down as the teams are in very, very different situations. Now, as I mentioned as well, I want to discuss some trade rumors involving the Rangers and Capitals, and let's get started with the New York Rangers. Now, in yesterday's video, we discussed the fact that young prospect Elias Anderson has requested a trade from the Rangers. Now, he's also left the team and does not want to play for them any longer. Clearly, Anderson's development has not gone as planned. He's not really produced at the NHL or AHL level. And there certainly are some concerns about those who have watched his game, and making a trade for him might not be as easy as he might think. Obviously, when you're a young prospect, you haven't really developed, you haven't really produced, there likely isn't going to be a ton of interest. But back in 2017, when he was made a first-round draft pick, there were certainly a lot more people that were, thinking he was going to be a bigger star and really succeed in the NHL, where some kind of figured he might be more of a second, third line type of player, like a middle six center, somebody who can play both ends of the ice, potential leader as well, where he was captain for Sweden at the World Juniors. So he's certainly a player that is known for having a lot of character, but certainly this is not something that you would think of that if you don't know a lot about the situation. But clearly he's frustrated with his development and wants out of town. Obviously, the fact that he's requested a trade isn't too big a deal, but the fact that he's left the team has caused the Rangers to suspend him without pay. So we'll see if the Rangers can find a deal here. Now, Elliot Friedman has mentioned the fact that there was talks before between the Rangers and Oilers before December the 1st, before Puljujärvi could not be signed. Obviously, right now he's playing in Finland, and the deadline has passed for him to sign an NHL contract and play in the NHL this year. So obviously that is not going to be happening, but not to say that Puljujärvi could not be traded. Obviously those two prospects are both players that were drafted highly and have not developed as planned and are struggling with their current situations, and there was talk about a potential swap. So we'll see, maybe now that Anderson's officially requested a trade, if something like that could be revisited. I mean, obviously Anderson wants out, Puljujärvi wants out. Might be an easy thing for the two teams to connect on and make a swap of struggling forwards there. So we'll see. But the big concern with Elias Anderson is he doesn't play with enough pace, and obviously that is important at the NHL. The speed of the game is getting faster and faster all the time, and it's been noted by numerous scouts that he's not playing with enough pace, enough speed, and that maybe he's a step behind and can't keep up. And I guess if that's the case, well, he could continue to work on that, but it's something that's going to have to show improvement for NHL teams to really give him much more of an opportunity. So let me know if you think the Oilers and Rangers should possibly connect on a swap of struggling prospect forwards, and maybe a new home would do them both good and get their careers back on track. Now, the other team I want to touch on today as well is the Washington Capitals. They have a couple of big-time pending unrestricted free agents, and there's been a lot of uncertainty over their futures with the organization, and that includes star goaltender Braden Holtby and longtime forward Nicklas Backstrom. Now, both these guys obviously are having a heck of a season right now. They've had great careers with the Capitals. Of course, won the Stanley Cup a couple seasons ago. And right now, their main focus is, again, on winning and hopefully getting back to another Stanley Cup. Now, Braden Holtby's situation, I think, is very different than Backstrom. He has Ilya Samsonov playing behind him, playing very well, and very well could be the goalie of the future for that franchise. But I would imagine, based on comparables, that Holtby's likely going to be looking for a big-time contract, somewhere in that $9 to $10 million range, something comparable to what we saw with Sergei Bobrovsky. Of course, Carey Price making similar money as well. And really, there's no reason why Holtby can't look at those contracts and say, I deserve that as well. Clearly, he's played just as well throughout his career. He's got a Stanley Cup. So I do think it's fair for Holtby to say that he deserves as much of a contract based on what he's accomplished here as well. And that very well might prove to be too rich for the Capitals. Now, based on latest reports from Saturday Headlines, has been noted that Holtby does not intend to negotiate a contract extension during the season. They're going to let it ride and discuss it in the offseason. And they've also reaffirmed here that Capitals fans really should not be too concerned over this, that they've taken the same approach with other players in the past, like John Carlson, even TJ Oshie, and both players were re-signed to pretty lucrative long-term contracts. It gives GM Brian McClellan a little bit more time to reevaluate the future of the franchise, reevaluate what other pieces he can move possibly to make a new contract work, and decide if these guys remain with the organization longer term. Now, in the case of Nicklas Backstrom, he's actually not using an agent. He is actually negotiating his own deal. Now, Backstrom apparently is close to coming to a contract extension, but the sticking point appears to be term and not money. He was asked about using comparables and other things, and he said basically, considering how long he's been with the franchise and how well he's played, he's really not too concerned over using a lot of other comparable contracts that were around the league as part of the negotiation process. He said either they're going to come to terms and get it done, or maybe the team will go in another direction. Obviously, Backstrom's still playing pretty well up to a point per game pace this year, so he can certainly still play, still be very productive. And I would imagine if term is a sticking point, maybe he's looking for, maybe 4 or 5 years. Maybe they would prefer 2 or 3 or something a little bit shorter. At least that would be my guess. But Backstrom, like I said, still very productive. If the Capitals and he can't come to terms on a contract, he will not have any issues getting a deal done elsewhere. But I would imagine the Caps want to keep him in the fold. It's just going to be tough to figure out salary cap wise. Personally, I think between the two players, if one leaves and one stays, the one to go would be more likely be Holtby. He's looking at a bigger, longer-term contract, which might be more difficult for them to actually come to terms on, even if they feel, it's certainly justified for what he is looking for. Now, could we see either of these players be traded before the deadline? It is always possible. You hate to say never, but I do think it's very unlikely that either of these guys go anywhere, barring some kind of, significant drop-off in Washington, which I also don't see happening as well. The Caps are, going to be in contention for the division win. They're going to be in contention for, being a high-ranking team in the playoffs. Certainly going to be another Stanley Cup contender this year, so this really doesn't make sense for them to move either of these players, to keep them at the very least as their own rental, make a run in another Stanley Cup, and then reevaluate in the offseason. So even though there's been some rumors over these players based on their contracts. I just don't see the team moving either one, but it is quite likely, in my opinion, that Braden Holtby is wearing a different jersey when the start of next season rolls around, and it very well could be the top goalie on the free agent market come this summer. So let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. Should we see a trade between the Rangers and the Oilers? Could we see either of these Washington Capitals long-time star players be moved along or end up wearing different jerseys next year, possibly even through free agency, if the Caps decide to retain them as their own rentals for the playoff run? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.